So we shouldn't celebrate when social media conservatives get banned.
Yes.
So, Stefan Molyneux got banned off Twitter. Okay, I thought it was funny as fuck. Banned off YouTube too. Why shouldn't I find that funny?
I apologize for this sudden outburst of depravity, but this video is going to be about Vaush's shifting political principles when it comes to granting equality of freedom of speech to everyone, which also unfortunately includes conservatives and those who are on the cultural right. So bear with me, as more clips of Vaush will be used in order to illustrate that Vaush is a mere tribalist who wants his political group to dominate and oppress other political groups in the process, as he cares so little for maintaining his principles or sticking with his supposed ideology that also doesn't exist, as he both claims to be a Marxist yet doesn't understand the theory, as real Marxists don't acknowledge him on their side and even are making response videos towards him. He calls himself a classical liberal yet is willing to discriminate against people he doesn't like and advocate for violence and oppression against them. So who is Vaush? I would argue a typical political tribalist who wants to destroy the West and the people who have built it. But in this video, only one subject of his particular cancelable behavior will be covered if our society had truly operated by the laws of Karl Popper, in which he had advocated for not tolerating the intolerant. That is, as you can guess, his position on tolerating people's ability to express their thoughts in a civil manner, without a fear of not only social ostracization, as he calls consequences, but also corporate interference that will lead to people off their platform. And as a supposed liberal Marxist that he calls himself, you would assume that he would not only tolerate people expressing views he disagrees with, but also would be concerned when large corporations are shutting down free speech, as those would probably be the things that liberal Marxists would be very concerned about if they had to stick to their principles, right?
No, corporations absolutely be able to decide whether or not to ban people. As long as we have private corporations, I think they absolutely have a right to make those decisions.
Well, let's unpack that. First of all, as a skeptical but still a remaining capitalist, I think I'm quite appalled by Vaush's defense of private property used by the bourgeoisie in order to control the behavior of the people who are on their platform. He might as well refer to himself as an anarcho-capitalist from now on, because that strong of a defense of a private property I am yet to hear being produced by the PragerU, but it all comes together once you hear the other part of the clip.
Anytime they censor like LGBTQ stuff, or anytime there are bans of like lefties, we should stir up a fuss. And we shouldn't stir up a fuss when conservatives get banned. When conservatives get banned, not only is it generally beneficial to the platform, because usually when conservatives get banned, it's because they're doing some really fucking heinous shit. Like, let's be real. But it's also morally good because fuck conservatives.
In other words, he is fine with discriminating and oppressing conservatives on the privately owned platform that, according to Marxists, should be worker-owned or nationalized. But let's face it, Vaush doesn't believe in Marxism nor liberalism. His grift towards it can be best summarized as it is the two ideologies that would work together in order to bring about the collapse of the West, as he has a deep hatred for people who differ from him politically to a point that he advocates for their oppression. Here's, for example, what he had to say about James Damore being fired from Google.
Wait, it's not censorship to fire a person.
It would be censorship to fire somebody over something they said, right?
No, if you're contributing to an internal culture of toxicity, like say writing a manual on how like women aren't as good at doing their job as men are, or whatever the fuck that thing was about. It's been a while. I don't think it's censorship to fire you.
A few moments later.
That is censorship. Sometimes it's justified, sometimes it's not. I agree.
I don't know if that fits the definition of censorship, but sure, fine. I think Google is in their right to fire people if they want to.
On one hand, I feel kind of sad for Vaush for not really having any principles besides wanting to destroy the West and attack the people who he disagrees with, as it is pretty common for tribalists to do, but on the other hand, I feel a bit relieved after I publish this video, because it will contribute to his already declining reputation, not only amongst Marxists, but amongst other political groups, as more and more people would understand that he is just a basic tribalist who has little things to offer besides lefty tribalism, confirmation bias, and hatred for the right. Also, if you really want to know what are Vaush's exceptions to when companies cannot abuse their power in limiting speech, then this video clip will summarize it rather perfectly.
So when you say they have a right to do it, what do you mean by a right? So just I want to get down to like
I think
the
if
brass
you
tacks
own
on
a
this.
website, you should be able to ban people from using that website.
Regardless of who the person is.
Well, as long as you're not discriminating against them as a member of like a protected class. I mean, if you're banning people because they're Jewish, then you could take up some sort of claim, I imagine.
Yes, a member of a protected class, something that whites will never become, and something that Vaush is talking about so openly without even realizing how racist he is being, by de facto advocating for racial discrimination, even in addition to the already existing diversity hiring and the affirmative action. But again, I'm not at all surprised, since that can be deducted from his tribalistic ideology, since a tribe is usually formed in an opposition to another tribe, so his opposition to the White West is perfectly logical and it stems from his cultural leftist identity. But regardless, it was pretty funny for me to witness that Vaush operates in a group hierarchy that leftists supposedly pretend to reject, where those at the bottom are not protected class and you could discriminate against them without consequences, while those at the top are the protected class, so go ahead and try to attack the ideas that they spewed. But let's still spend a minute of our time and contemplate what Vaush's position with regards to limiting of freedom of speech is, and he justifies it precisely in order to minimize harm, and I tend to agree with that to an extent, and maybe we should go ahead and regulate speech in case if it indirectly promotes violence, but Vaush seems to forget one thing, that in addition to his classist and racist rumblings, he also happens to promote violence and advocate for a revolution, and it could be argued that a limitation of freedom of speech could be placed on him for those reasons, or just by simply saying this.
The entire world of the United States is based on white supremacy and xenophobia. This country isn't special. People here are radicalized.
As it is known that words like this have helped to spread BLM violence towards certain targeted groups, and that can be best demonstrated by this graph right here. So go ahead and write down a comment whether Vaush should be censored off YouTube for saying things that demonstrably contribute to violence, rioting, and racial hatred. And remember, we all know that if the United States was labeled by most people as an Asian supremacist country, then rioting and revolting against the United States would be perceived as justified, and the racial discrimination against Asians will be labeled justified too. In fact, it wouldn't exist, as you can't be racist against them. And finally, if you didn't have enough of Vaush's fuckery and still believe that he is still somehow an honest actor, even though he might not understand liberalism and Marxism and might advocate for violence and child pornography amongst many other despicable things, but still cling on the idea that Vaush is somehow not a deceptive person, then just stay for the last seconds of this video.
The issue is I could also bring more people over to the left by being dishonest about other beliefs that I have too. Like, I think that fundamentally, I don't know, I feel like if we're having to concede the point that it's good that neo-Nazis get banned off Twitter for violating Twitter TOS in order to appeal to people, I feel like we're ceding a lot of ground there for a very marginal gain, because whether we like it or not, people on the left are going to celebrate when these people get banned. I think banning Nazis off social media absolutely increases well-being, like easy.
So that alone would, if they made an explicit claim that they want to ban just conservatives, I think that could benefit, like that could maximize well-being a huge degree, but they don't.